Imagine being 60 years old and realizing that you've wasted your entire life. For a lot of people, that's not a fear, it's a reality. I spent the last 3 years selling life insurance full-time, specifically final expense in the senior market. And I've heard the life stories of thousands of seniors throughout the country. It's taught me a lot about life. In this video, I want to share the most valuable life lessons that I've learned while being in the final expense market and hearing thousands of stories from people that are basically living, the final days of their life. And I'm hoping that you can use the stories that I share and this information to learn from their mistakes. Now, really quick, if you don't know who I am, my name is Kevin Montes. I work in the financial industry, specifically selling final expense insurance 100% over the phone. And I mean, this year alone, I've talked to over 4,800 seniors and I've heard thousands of stories. And the reason that I'm making this video is so that together we can learn from their mistakes and live better lives. And the reason that I'm wearing this ugly sweater is because it's Christmas time, and when else am I gonna wear it? Check it out. It says it's the most wonderful time for a beer, I think it says. So stupid. And I think it does make sense to add a little bit of context just in case you're not super familiar with the final expense market that we serve. When you're working in final expense, the market that you're going to be serving is typically lower to lower middle class. Income wise, we're talking about anywhere between $20,000 to $50,000 a year as a household. The age demographic is usually 50 or 55 to 80. Education is very minimal. In most cases, it's high school at best. And as far as the lifestyle goes, realistically, a lot of these people are living on food stamps, government housing. The only income they get is from their social security checks, no retirement plans. It's not for them a very fun place to be. And so, a lot of times when I'm talking to my clients and in this market and hearing their stories, and they've opened up about the regrets they have and the things they wish they would have done different. And I've been able to take a lot of that because it's not just following what someone's doing that could be valuable to you. It's learning what not to do that could be just as valuable or sometimes even more. And so having these conversations, these are the lessons that I've learned. So lesson number one, biggest lesson of all: nobody is going to save you. Actually, as I'm recording this video, the elections just took place. And although I do believe that it's super important to, go out and vote, and I do believe that makes a difference, I think it's crazy how much weight or how much people believe that this person that becomes elected or the people that we put in power are just going to absolutely save us from the problems in our lives. Like, yes, voting makes a difference, and, the people that we have in power and the society that we have around us, of course, it's going to influence a lot of it. But ultimately, no government is ever going to care more about your life and your well-being than you. And I bring that up because it absolutely blows my mind how many 60, 70-year-olds I talk to who after so long, after so far into their lives, are still waiting for someone to come in and just save them. Like, one fairly common objection that we get when selling life insurance, for example, is, oh, I don't need life insurance. I saw on Facebook that the governor just signed this thing and, they're going to pay for everything now. And I don't mean to, I'm not here to judge, but it does blow my mind. How are you around for so long and you still believe the government gives a shit about you? And especially at that point, because like I said earlier, a lot of times our clients are living on just straight up social security. Like, I hear a lot of people on $800 a month, $900 a month. But the reason they're living that way is because they believed before they retired that the government was going to take care of them and make sure that they're fine. Well, now they're barely making ends meet because that's where waiting around and hoping that someone saves you will get you. It will get you barely getting by. Or another thing I hear sometimes, this is more people in their 50s before they're eligible for social security. I've talked to some people that just have straight up no income, and I'll ask them,
well, hey, what's going on? How come you're not working? Oh, well, I'm waiting for this lawsuit to pay out, and if I work, I'm gonna lose the lawsuit because I'm fighting that I got, hurt, disabled, whatever. And I'll ask, oh wow, well, how long have you been fighting this lawsuit? Oh, it's been 7 years.
You haven't worked for 7 years? You've said no to making any income for 7 years so that you can try to win this lawsuit that, dude, it's been 7 years and you're fighting with people who have money and can buy better lawyers. Like, how are you not processing this? But they keep themselves stuck in that position because they're waiting for, they believe that's going to save them. Like, oh, I can just get this one big chunk of money and it's going to change my life and then I won't have to XYZ. Dude, nobody is going to come to save you. And the sooner you can learn that, the sooner you could take control of your own life and start winning. But that really does show me the mindset of someone who ends up 60, 70 years old at the mercy of their government. The reason they got there is because they believed that somebody else was going to solve their problems. All right, life lesson number 2. The minute you think you know it all is the minute you become the dumbest person in the room. If you've been on the field, you could probably agree. Some of the worst prospects you've ever had to deal with were the ones that just thought they knew it all. Like, for example, the thing I brought up earlier, when some people say, no, I don't have to pay for anything. The governor just signed this thing, XYZ, and they just, when they're unwilling to hear you out or listen to a different perspective, those are the worst people to deal with. There's just some people you just cannot talk some sense into them. And it's the people that are like the most delusional person, just so off from reality that 100% absolutely believes they're right. While on the flip side, it's usually those that are willing to hear you out and have a conversation that are the smartest, that are the most educated. And that's actually a real thing. There's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the more that someone believes that they know, the less competent they actually are. Like, let's just say, to make it very easy, in a classroom setting, it's usually the person with the highest score that believes they didn't do that well, and the person with the lowest score that believes they just crushed it. And it makes sense, because the more you actually know about something, well, the more that you become exposed to these other related topics, and the more you uncover deeper ideas about this one thing, and you begin to realize, oh wow, there's so much more to this than I thought. As opposed to someone who's looking into something for the first time, oftentimes they've only come across the surface level stuff, and so they believe there's really not much else to it, therefore they got everything about it figured out. So the more that you think you know, the less you actually understand. The only real way to gain any knowledge or gain any expertise on something is to allow yourself to have an open mind and open yourself up to hearing other perspectives, even the ones that you disagree with. Because you don't learn with this. You don't learn by talking. You learn by listening. That's the only way to take in new information. And again, that's how a lot of our clients fall into, the category that they're in, is because a lot of their life, they lived it thinking they had it all figured out. And that's kind of where that gets you. All right, lesson number 3, success is an inside job. It's really easy when, life's not going so well. It's easy to blame everything but yourself. It's easy to blame lack of resources. It's easy to blame lack of money. It's easy to blame lack of education, lack of opportunities, lack of connections. Oh, the reason I'm living like this is because of the government. The reason I'm living like this is because of my trauma. Well, let me tell you the one story that really helped me realize this, that just shifted my perspective. I once had a client who I went to meet face to face. This is before telesales. And when I walked in, it was it was a 1-bedroom trailer home. The sofas were just ruined, just piss stained, cigarette holes in them and everything. It was just kind of one of those things. Like, you walk in and they're not doing very great. And so I'm having this conversation with this client, and she was actually really great, very, very sweet lady. But what I learned about her just blew my mind. She told me that when her dad had passed away, she had inherited a pretty large sum of money. She inherited $600,000. Before I continue, ask yourself, if overnight you inherited 600 grand, if you inherited that type of money, what would you do with it? Would it change your life? Okay, so this lady inherited 600K. It went all straight to her. Like, she was the beneficiary of all of it. And so it kind of blew my mind. Like, well, maybe she's super frugal, or like why are you living like this? She ran through every single bit of that money, not in 10 years, not in 5 years, in 3 years. It took her 3 years to get through $500,000. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's stupid. I would never do that. Look, and maybe that's true. Hopefully that's true. But that clearly illustrated to me that it's not the lack of money that's keeping people in poverty. It's lack of discipline, lack of education, the lack of just skills or the willingness to acquire skills to, learn what the to do with it. And that's kind of the crazy thing. Now that I think about it, I don't know if I asked, but I have no idea where she spent that money. I think a lot of it was just like she gave a lot of money away. And I do remember her mentioning that she had made some investments that just went bad because she didn't know what the she was doing. They ended up being scams. And so it just showed me, okay, well, that's what happens when money falls into the wrong hands. It's not about the money, it's the person. And again, if you're in final expense, if you're out there in the field and you've been in this market, you've seen that a lot of times the second that their social security check hits, it's gone by the end of the week and they're just left with no money for the rest of the month. So again, they're not living that way because, they didn't come from money. They're living that way because they've been irresponsible with their money for the past 50, 60, 70 years. So it's very clear to me now, money doesn't fix people. People fix themselves. And it's not just money that people blame. A lot of people blame, oh, well, I just don't have the connections. Oh, I never had the opportunities. I didn't have the education, XYZ. It's not about any of those things. Money, for example, it's just a tool. And it's just like any other tool. If you're trying to build a house and you don't know how to use a hammer, well, getting a fancier hammer isn't going to help. It's not the hammer that builds a house. It's the house builder. I clearly don't build houses. So same way with just general success. Success isn't about what you have. It's about who you choose to become. And that's been very clear to me for a very long time. So I think that's enough on that. Resources don't make you successful. Your choices do. All right, lesson number 4. Life is really not as long as you think it is. A lot of times when we're younger, or really at any stage of our life, for whatever reason, we always think we have all this time ahead of us. I mean, I've heard from 60-year-olds, oh, I don't need life insurance. I'm too young for that. No offense to anyone, but in what world is 60 years old too young for life insurance? And then here's the other thing. A lot of people who think that way, they put off life insurance for years through their 40s, 50s, 60s. And then finally, when they're 70, maybe 80 years old, they finally go, okay, you know what? Maybe it's time I get some life insurance. Then they find out that the rates are just ridiculous because they're on the last quarter of their lives. And they go, oh, well, it's too expensive. It's not fair. Of course it's too expensive. That's why you were supposed to get it when you were younger. But anyway, I've noticed it's even worse in younger people, especially people in their 20s. I'm in my 20s. And, at this age, it seems like we often look at this time of our lives as a time to just relax and have fun and, mess around and just enjoy our 20s because, we have all the time in the world to figure our lives out later. Well, first of all, that's assuming you're going to wake up tomorrow, which anyone with common sense knows that's not guaranteed. But the other thing is, man, life really comes at you fast. I mean, I'm only in my 20s and I'm already saying that. I mean, I don't know if you felt this way, but I feel like every single year, it feels like 12 months goes by quicker and quicker. So the older that I get, just the faster life seems to go by. And that also makes sense because if you think about it, do you remember when you were 4 years old and your parents would tell you, yeah, hey, we'll do this next year. And that year just felt like forever. Well, that's because as a 4-year-old, 1 year is 25% of your life. But then when you're talking to someone who's, let's say, 50 years old, well, 1 year is 2% of their life. And so that's why as we get older, time goes by faster. And also we look at, 50s as the halfway point to our life because we assume we're all going to make it to 100. The average lifespan of a male in 2024 is 78 years old. For a female, it's 82 years old, which if I find out that I'm off, I'm going to add them to the screen here, but 78 to 82 years old. So for a male, what that means, by the time you're 39 years old, you are statistically halfway through your life. So where does that put you at 20 years old? Well, that's already 25% of your life, which means that when you're in your 20s, you don't really have that much life ahead of you. And so as I talk to a lot of our clients, I hear their stories. I hear how they live their 20s, how they lived through their 30s, and they really just lived it day by day. They didn't take things too serious. And I don't know if this is the right message or not, but at the end of the day, our younger years, our 20s and our 30s, will dictate where you end up in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. Every decision you make matters and becomes a part of your identity. So all I know, and I'm not saying that people should be working 24/7, but what I don't want is to be 50, 60 years old and unable to work as much as I am now and having to, which would then put me in the position, like I said earlier, of just being at the mercy of my government. I personally don't want to depend on that. 'Cause again, I've seen what that looks like. It sucks. And it's actually not just about building your future, but also the way that I'm spending it. Like I try to be very, very intentional. I don't have time for people that if I don't absolutely love someone, I don't spend time with them. And it's just, it is what it is. Like I don't show up to family parties I don't want to go to. I don't show up to functions I don't want to go to. Like I pick and choose what I'm going to do with my time, not because I think my time is more valuable than someone else's, but because I think all of our time is incredibly valuable and none of us should be spending it doing something we don't want to be doing, or at least get you closer to your goals in some sort of way. All right, lesson number 5. Money doesn't solve everything, but it solves a lot of shit. So everything I was saying earlier about how money doesn't just fix your problems and it's not about the things you have, but the person you become in the process. I absolutely stand by that, but it doesn't mean that money doesn't matter at all. Because I do want to make this clear, like the story that I shared earlier, the problem with my client's life wasn't that she received $500,000 overnight. That's not what ruined her life. It's that she wasn't the type of person who could hold on to that, right? Or do anything with it. So it's not the money that's the issue. It's the person who sometimes doesn't know how to act. But let's not pretend that money doesn't solve a lot of problems. Because again, it can't make you a good person and it doesn't buy happiness. But you know what it does buy? It buys freedom. It buys security. It buys time. In a lot of cases, it can buy your health. Now, I am aware that both someone with money and someone without it can both get cancer. Like I'm aware that money doesn't change that. However, it is a lot easier to treat cancer with money than it is without it. That is undebatable. And when I say time, well, I mean, money can help someone buy assets, an investment, whatever. But when done properly, it can buy, some sort of passive income opportunity. And I say passive in air quotes because I don't believe that anything's truly passive, but passive income opportunities that could allow someone to spend more time with their family or spend more time doing things they enjoy or things they find important. Money can place a family in a better neighborhood, a safer for a neighborhood. I can personally tell you that one. You know, it can pay for a better education. It can pay for healthier ingredients. You know, money allows you to do more fun with your life. You know, having money will give you options that you just won't have when you're broke. And so adding on to the, you know, to the last lesson too, with life being short, you know, that is why I work so much. You know, I understand the lifestyle is not for everybody, completely fine, but I've been with money and I've been without it. And every single week I talk to hundreds of people without it. It's not even close. Money will give you a better quality of life if you know what to do with it. So I know some people say, well, money doesn't buy happiness. It's not. Yeah, I know it doesn't, but it buys basically everything else. Lesson number 6, today's actions will dictate tomorrow's reality. So here, you know, what I specifically have in mind is more regarding our health. Let me tell you something. I've got the craziest sweet tooth. Like, I can eat 2 tubs, and I'm not exaggerating this shit. I can eat 2 tubs of ice cream and a bowl of Fruity Pebbles after. Like, I crazy sweet tooth. And for years and years, even at the age that I'm at now, my mom would always worry about me. You know, it's still, every time she calls me, she asks, hey, are you still eating a lot of sugar? Like, you know, she's worried that I'll get freaking diabetes. And I've always told her,
Mom, relax, I'm fine, you know, I'm not gonna get diabetes, I work out a lot, I XYZ, whatever.
For years, she tried to get me to stop eating so much sugar. I know I have a problem, but I didn't really care enough to change anything about it. And it's selling final expense that finally got me to change that habit. Because every single day, I'm talking to someone who's got COPD, diabetes, is on kidney dialysis, congestive heart failure. They're breathing out of an oxygen tank sometimes to help them breathe. It's honestly like the worst of the worst health conditions that you would think don't really happen to a lot of people. I'll put it like this. If I'm doing some underwriting and someone tells me they're not taking any more than 3 medications, I don't believe them. So what I'm saying is, we work with a lot of sick people. And when I realized how common it really is, and a lot of times even how young, you know, they were diagnosed with these conditions at, it finally made me realize, damn, my mom is right. And so coming across so many people that deal with some serious health conditions like COPD, diabetes, like the things that I mentioned, just because they couldn't control their impulses, because they couldn't stop smoking, they couldn't stop eating, they couldn't stop sometimes, you know, drinking, breathing out of an oxygen tank, or having to take insulin shots, and all of that sounds so miserable to me, and I want no part of it. And it wasn't until I started encountering these things so much that it got me to finally see it for what it is. So now I'm telling you this because, believe it or not, no matter how young you think you are right now, the things you do today absolutely matter, especially because at the end of the day, us human beings, we're creatures of habit. So you might think that the little things you do don't matter, but they do, especially when done consistently. I mean, think about how hard it is to break a habit. And so the longer you keep a bad habit going, no matter how little you think it is, the harder it's going to be to break it, because you've been doing it for so long, it sometimes becomes almost like a part of your identity. Again, I know that when we're young, we think we're invincible, but as I've seen in these conversations, our lives, and especially your body, is keeping a detailed record of everything that you do. And one day it's going to present you with a bill. And if you're not careful, that bill is going to be brutal. So the things you do today, big or small, absolutely matter. All right, lesson number 7, instant gratification will ruin your life. So when you really just kind of zoom out and, you know, you look at a lot of their problems as a whole, it's not too hard to realize that the root of all of these problems really just comes down to one thing. It's instant gratification. It's the constant pursuit of cheap dopamine, of pleasure, of a quick thrill, the constant purchasing of lottery tickets, the cigarette smoking, you know, the irresponsible spending, the bad eating habits, all of these things that have led to the lifestyle that they're living now. It all comes from just the lack of self-control and, you know, the giving in to all these cheap, you know, and it's even pretty well understood that, you know, a lot of times, think about how they fill out a lead form, and then you call them up, and within the first 30 seconds, they're yelling at you and saying, I'm not interested, XYZ, even though they had clearly filled out a lead form. And, you know, depending on the lead, they might have even put down a beneficiary, and they might have typed in all of these things qualifying themselves. But when you call, they're not interested. If you've ever wondered what that's about, here's what's often going on. See, sometimes filling out that lead form and, you know, kind of taking that small step forward gives them that sort of dopamine rush, and gives them that feeling that, hey, look at me, I'm doing something for my family. You know, it gives them that little hit. But then by the time you call them, they've already felt the satisfaction of taking a step forward, and they don't want to go any further than that. Or think about the people that will spend an entire hour with you, hour and a half maybe, on the phone, and they will answer every question that you ask them, and, you know, agreeing with everything and saying, yes, I want want to protect my family. I want to do this. I want to do that. This is very important to me. And then finally, when you get to the very end, they say,
oh, well, I don't want to do anything now.
or they give you some BS reason why they can't move forward. And it's because that conversation gave them the satisfaction that they were looking for. Them just having the conversation made them feel like, well, I tried, but it was too expensive, or I don't know, this person might have been a scam, or XYZ, whatever. They're giving themselves these excuses of like why they couldn't do it, but hey, at least I tried. It's crazy, isn't it? But before you judge them, why don't we take a look inside? Why don't we ask ourselves, well, have we ever done anything like that? I mean, have we ever said, yeah, I really want to lose weight this year, or I really want to work on my fitness, and maybe we even bought a gym membership, but then we just didn't show up? Or have we ever said, hey, you know what, I really want financial freedom, I want to be my own boss, and I want to work on my own terms, and so I'm gonna learn how to sell life insurance so that I don't have to answer to anybody and I can work wherever and whenever I want. But then maybe we just don't do the work, or we don't show up to trainings, or we don't follow the mentorship of whoever's coaching us. You've probably done the same thing. I know I've done it in the past. I mean, I'm not perfect, so that's what these people are going through. I mean, that's how they've lived their lives. Don't judge them for it, but instead take that extra mile to try to guide them into facing the reality and helping them make that decision. But anyway, I don't want to turn this one into a sales training. That's not what it's supposed to be. The whole point that I'm trying to make here is that is what has led a lot of our clients in Final Expense to live the lives that they're, not very happy with. And if you're someone who has allowed that to take over, like the examples I just gave about fitness and even selling life insurance or pursuing an opportunity, I want you to take a look at the people that you serve in Final Expense. That is what your future looks like. Now, does that excite you or does that scare you? If that excites you, great, then keep doing what you're doing. If it scares you, well, then you better start making a change. And finally, the last big lesson that I've learned by serving this market for the past few years: indecision is the root of all misery. So again, think about who we're serving. We're working with someone who's in their 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe 80s, and are just now looking at getting life insurance. I mean, is that not procrastination at its finest? They've put it off for so many years because, again, they were just living one day at a time. They believe they just didn't need it when they were younger, whatever. Well, guess what happens? Now that they're looking at it when they're 70, 80 years old, what do the rates look like? It's far more expensive than if they would have got it when they were 30 and 40, isn't it? And so now they're stuck having to decide, well, do I just leave my family with nothing, or am I willing to put a pretty big percentage of my paycheck away to make sure that this problem's taken care of? And they're stuck having to make that choice because they refuse to make a decision on taking care of this problem earlier in their life. It's their unwillingness to face it and make that decision earlier that created this problem in the first place. So what I've learned from working in this demographic is indecision will just ruin your life. And see, here's the thing. Refusing to make a decision is a decision in itself. It's a decision to fail. Nothing good comes out of just not making a decision. You can either decide, all right, hey,
I'm not going to get life insurance, but I'll at least start putting money aside for at least those expenses.
Not the route that I would take, but I would respect that if they actually follow through with it, of course, much more than someone who's saying,
I don't think I need to do that right now. Let me just think about it some more.
And then just putting it off and off and off for another few years. I mean, you're just putting it off. And that in itself is a decision to not do anything about it, which by law or by definition or by whatever is a decision to fail. In what way could that ever go well? So really, indecision is not some kind of neutrality. It's a decision to just let life happen to you rather than, making shit happen. And, I think that right there is an important lesson, especially to us as, insurance agents, because I do see a lot of times, people will get into this industry and they're fired up and they'll have themselves believe they made a decision because they, got a license and signed up with an IMO or whatever. But see, the real decision that has to be made in our industry is, am I willing to work and sacrifice for the things that I say that I want? Because in case you're unaware, let me be the one to tell you, sales is not easy. A lot of people suck at it and they ruin it for the rest of us. But at the same time, as I've said before, if it were easy, everybody would be doing it and there'd be nothing special about it, which means we wouldn't get paid as much for it. Because if anybody can do it, then why would you get paid so much for it when the carriers can just pay less if it were so easy? And so the real reason that I see a lot of people kind of fail out of this business, it's you who has to commit to making it work and not looking at, 20 other opportunities. It's just like a relationship. Marriages work when both people commit to each other and they decide decide we're going to make this work no matter how hard things get. Business is the same way. You have to decide, hey, no matter how hard this business can get, I'm going to make it work regardless of what gets thrown at me. And when you finally make that decision, you will become successful. But a lot of times the reason people fail is because they haven't made that decision. They say they have, but their actions show different. So at least I've learned that I don't want to be that person. I don't want to end up as someone who's 60 years old, filled with regret because I didn't decide. And these are the lessons that I've learned the past few years from hearing the stories from people who are much older than I am, who have gone through much more than I have. And I hope that together, you and I can learn from their mistakes.